In the blood-soaked record of Tudor England, where queens climbed the steps to a scaffold and a king measured love by the cut of a headsman's axe, there lies a tale colder than execution. It is the story of a woman who stayed alive by accepting disgrace, a bride imported to secure a realm, and then remade into a warning. Anne of Cleves crossed the channel to become a wife. She arrived to become a symbol. Her offense was not treason, not forbidden rites, not infidelity. Her offense was far more unforgivable in the eyes of Henry VIII. She did not kindle his desire. What follows is not simply rejection. It is an act of theater staged by a wounded monarch, a slow-motion punishment set to the rhythm of court whispers and physician reports, where vanity did the work of a sword. The world remembers Anne as the fortunate queen who kept her head. The truth is crueler. Survival came at a cost that does not bleed. It takes dignity first, then reputation, and it leaves the victim walking. The rot did not live in a foreign princess. It breathed from the throne itself. The year was 1539. England was alone. Rome had condemned Henry. The crowns of France and the Holy Roman Empire had found common ground in the creed of old faith and old power. The Channel felt narrow. The roads to Calais felt shorter. A king who had sent his first marriage to judgment and his second to the sword needed partners on the continent and quiet at home. Thomas Cromwell, the chief maker of Henry's world, set his eyes on the German states. He found a way through the Duchy of Cleves. The bride was Anne. The bargain was Protestant strength. The stakes were not small. Charles V stood behind banners that had crushed cities. Francis of France weighed peace, war, and profit like coins on a table. England had broken from Rome and could not count on old friendships. The princes of the empire who favored reform looked like a ladder to safety. Duke Wilhelm of Cleves held respect in those circles. Mary his sister, and England would stand in a larger circle of friends. It was not poetry. It was survival. At the same time, another story worked in secret beneath velvet and gold. The champion of royal tournaments had become a man who could barely mount a horse without help. The music at court did not silence the sounds from the royal chamber. A leg wound that never healed. Dressings that soaked through. A smell that ran ahead of the monarch like a herald. Physicians spoke of corrupted humors. They bandaged. They lanced. They soothed pain with opiates that softened judgment. The young god of Greenwich had hardened into a sovereign who could not accept his own decline. The body failed. The pride grew. Modern readers can guess at the cause. A deep bone infection can burn, can weaken, can cloud desire and power alike. Circulation suffers. Fevers rise and fall. Flesh breaks down. None of this would be known to Tudor medicine. Yet the court had to explain royal failure in bed and council. The safest answer was always the same. Blame the woman. Before Anne ever set foot in England, a likeness had carried her across borders. Hans Holbein painted what he saw. The face is calm. The eyes steady. The dress German in the cut of the sleeves and richness of the cloth. The king liked what he saw on a panel of oak. He studied the picture as if it were a promise. He turned a portrait into a dream. In December of 1539, Anne crossed grey seas with a fleet of trunks and the hopes of two governments. She had studied English manners. She had learned the steps of English dances. She had practiced the language. She was 24 and prepared for duty. Tapestries, jewels, and ceremonial garments filled her chests, proof of rank and of the seriousness of the pact. At Rochester, illusion shattered on contact with custom. Henry loved to dress as a stranger and test a bride with a playful ambush. He entered as a messenger and expected romance to bloom on command. Anne, raised in a court that preferred ceremony to play, gave him polite attention and nothing more. No swoon. No spark. The mask was still on. The moment was lost. Witnesses saw his face harden, the jaw grind, the temper gather. Pride met reality. Pride did not yield. The wedding on the 6th of January 1540 looked like splendor and felt like mourning. Cloth of gold. Cold smiles. Quiet comments behind painted fans. The foreign ambassadors watched every glance and nod for signs. Henry stood beside and like a man who had already turned his mind to the exit. She bore herself with control she had learned from childhood. Duty first. Feeling after. She could not know that English court life could smother a person with gossip as effectively as a headsman with a blade. That night the royal bed became a stage. The king came to the sheets with bandaged legs and a mind that had decided on disgust. Later he said she smelled, or that her body was repellent, or that she was not a maid in the way a maid should be. The excuses shifted with the day. The conclusion never did. He claimed he had no power with her. He never asked if the failure was his. The complaints did not stop at the door. Physicians were told to confirm a story. Courtiers were told to carry it. The lies spread with speed because lies that protect power travel fast. And was foreign. And was plain. And was wrong for England. The refrain grew until the court could recite it in their sleep. A kingdom wrote a woman into a punch line so a king could sleep at night. The cruelty was organized. Ladies in her household reported every mistake, real or invented. Perfume became a fault. Accent became a joke. Dresses were too German. Manners too stiff. A circle of men and women learned that clever insults were a currency that bought favor. They paid daily. And learned a different lesson. Speak less. Watch more. Endure. The king's attention drifted in public toward Catherine Howard, a teenage girl whose innocence looked like proof that the king was still desirable. Youth can be a mirror for an aging man. Catherine became that mirror. She was English. She was quick to please. Each smile for the new darling weighed like a stone on the current wife. And did not weep in public. She did not protest. She bowed to a performance designed to make her feel like a guest at her own undoing. Europe saw what England tried to disguise. Letters crossed borders with a tone that mixed mockery and alarm. Reports from foreign courts described the smell of infection in royal rooms. French writers noted that some courtiers could sense the king's approach by scent alone. Ambassadors told their masters that Anne had been wronged and that the wrong had made England weaker. Even Anne's brother weighed the insult as a cause for a new alliance against London. Only Anne's calm requests for restraint kept that anger from turning into a new war. The machine that unmade queens began to move. Lawyers found the old rules that could serve a new need. Priests who remembered the deaths of Thomas More and John Fisher learned quickly what must be said and what must never be said. Committees were formed. Witnesses were examined. Notes were written with a result already known. Non-consummation. A prior contract from years past. A marriage that never existed in the eyes of God. The words were clean. The effect was not. The most shameful moment was private. A foreign princess was asked to prove the absence of a marital act. Examinations followed under color of medicine. Reports were drafted that served the royal case. A woman who had arrived as a respected ally was reduced to a set of paragraphs about her body. Those paragraphs would live in records for centuries and would be quoted as if they were truth. Thomas Cromwell paid for the plan he had made. The same day Parliament struck out Anne's marriage, Cromwell climbed the steps at Tower Hill. The axe fell. At Whitehall, the king smiled upon Catherine Howard and called it a fresh start. The message was clear. When policy fails, someone must bleed. Anne had offered submission. Cromwell had nothing left to offer. Anne read the room like a seasoned tactician. She understood that a clean refusal would lead to a final walk to a block. She also understood that a graceful retreat could keep her alive and make her secure. She agreed to the annulment. She accepted the title of the king's sister. She accepted lands, incomes, and houses that would keep her safe. She agreed to repeat the court's line about never sharing a bed and never being a true wife. In return, the kingdom allowed her to live. This choice was not cowardice. It was clarity. She had seen Catherine of Aragon refuse and die in pain. She had seen Anne Boleyn argue and then kneel before a French sword. She had no wish to join them. She chose to survive within the rules men had written and to bend those same rules for her own future. Freedom took an unexpected shape. Anne left the marital chamber and stepped into a calmer world. Richmond. Hever. Properties that were more than gifts. They were tools. She found good stewards. She studied account books. She learned the price of wool in different seasons. She sponsored improvements in the fields. She learned enough English law to negotiate terms without help. The ledgers that still exist show a careful hand and a mind for numbers. The woman written off as simple proved able in the arts that matter to power. Money gave her the right to be generous. She supported schools near her estates. She gave to church works that helped the poor despite the new order. She hired and trained servants for real trades. In those villages and towns, she became respected as a landlord who kept promises and paid on time. Reputation returned to her from the ground up, not from the throne down. She also created quiet ties between English and German merchants. Her rooms at Richmond became a place where learned refugees brought books and where men of trade brought news about coin, cloth, and credit. She was careful. She did not conspire. She listened, advised, and kept lines open across the North Sea. Reformers found in her a patron who understood the difference between zeal that burns and patience that builds. At court she practiced a different art. Appear when summoned. Smile without warmth. Offer gifts at the proper feast. Leave before talk turns to factions. She became present yet unthreatening. Foreign guests wrote home about her poise. Her English improved until she could manage contracts without an interpreter. She visited noble houses where family pride mattered more than royal mood, and she left with friendships that would help shield her when the crown changed heads. From a safe distance she watched the path of Catherine Howard. In less than 2 years the fifth queen went from a wedding to a block. The blade that spared and took another. It proved what Anne had already known. The safe choice had been the wise one. When Henry finally died in 1547, the court reshuffled once more. Catherine Parr remained in the storm. Anne did not. She had lands, silver, and rooms where she chose the guest list. Under Edward, reformers visited her and found a listener who could balance conscience and policy. Under Mary, a queen of old faith greeted Anne with courtesy rather than spite. That alone says much about the respect she had rebuilt. And had learned how to outlast a storm. She did not need to shout. Her last years were quiet, industrious, and unexpectedly content. She read widely in several languages. She collected music. She paid copyists to bind the books she loved. She combined the furnishings of Cleves and England into rooms that felt like a bridge rather than a wall. She gave work to craftsmen who needed patronage after years of religious change. The inventory taken after her death lists not only treasures but tools of the mind. It is the record of a person who continued to grow after the court had written her off. And died in 1557 at Chelsea. No panic. No armed guards. No prayer whispered over a sword. Servants and friends stood close. The funeral took her to Westminster Abbey, a resting place that speaks for itself. She was not thrown aside. She was honored. The woman mocked as a foreign mistake was buried as a lady of consequence. Even as the stone was set, a longer judgment had already begun. It asked why she had been scorned and answered that the scorn said more about the scorner than the scorned. The myth that she was coarse and unclean served a purpose in the 16th century. It still serves an old story about male pride and female blame. Read the letters. Read the dispatches from other courts. The stench that haunts the last decade of Henry's life did not trail after Anne. It came from the king's own wounds. The weakness that ruined nights in the marriage bed did not belong to the bride. It belonged to the groom. The court-dressed failure in the clothes of a foreign woman because power must never be wrong. What, then, is the legacy of Anne of Cleves? It is not survival as accident. It is survival as discipline. She understood that a direct fight with a Tudor king ends the same way for anyone who tries it. She refused to play that game. She chose to live and then built a life with care and skill. She turned the title of sister into a shield. She turned land into independence. She turned silence into strategy. Her story forces a harder truth about Henry and his court. England in this age cut off heads to make points and wrote lies to explain why the blade fell. The lies stuck for a long time. They crumbled when readers began to compare voices and pay attention to the ones not paid by the crown. When you clear away the smoke, you see a woman who was patient, practical, and strong. You see a king who could not accept that his flesh had limits and who punished others for the mirror they held up. On Grim History we do not ask you to pity Anne. We ask you to see the iron in her choice. Some people show courage in a single bright moment with a block and an axe. Some show a quieter kind of courage that stretches across years. It looks like a steady account book. It sounds like calm words in a council chamber. It ends in a clean bed at home and a stone in an abbey that still stands. Anne of Cleves did not defeat Henry by argument. She defeated him by outliving him. She did not swing for the fences. She planted and harvested. She turned the insult that was meant to break her into a life that proved the insult false. The court called her unfit. History calls her wise.